Hello and welcome to The Agenda with me and Phil Moorhouse. Sorry about that, we had a little bit of technical difficulty. I thought we were streaming and we actually spoke for a little bit and then it turned out that we weren't actually streaming. That was embarrassing. Anyway, Phil, good afternoon. Have you got anything to talk about today?
Well, I don't know. We'll have to have a little look in the news, see if anything's happened. It's been quiet.
It's been a quiet week, hasn't it? Big shout out to everyone in the chat who's here. Someone's getting angry with us for being late. I'm really sorry. We did think we were broadcasting for a few minutes there until we realised that we weren't. Houghton says, I've been playing drinking bingo. Every time one of Rishi's pledges whittled out by a defensive Tory is mentioned, I take a drink. Liver function now lower than Tory council seats. So what do you make of it all, Phil? Are we on schedule for a bit of a Tory route in this, or is it too early to say?
It is a little bit too early to say because we've only got, it's a little more than a third of the seats in so far. There should be now a bit of a flurry over the next hour or two. But it is not looking good for the Conservatives, even like there is a realistic prospect that I actually can't hear you, Graham.
You can't hear me?
I can now.
Oh, sorry. I wasn't saying anything.
Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. The thing is, right, one of the big markers for me, because it is really difficult, because you can see so many seats, but they're all different types of seats, and all the really geeky statisticians will sort of know whether they're on course for a good result or not. But I have to look for other signs because I'm not crunching all those numbers. And the biggest sign that has come up has been for, so on the, I think it was GMB, Good Morning Britain.
Yeah.
And they had the Boris Johnson cultist on because obviously the Democratic Conservative Organisation wants to go, oh, this is absolutely disgraceful results. Rishi Sunak, we told you he was rubbish. You should get Boris Johnson back immediately. And the person they got on was Bannerman, whom a lot of people won't know. Whereas you'd have thought if they thought that Rishi Sunak could be weakened by these results, it's been suggested they'd have had someone like Jacob Rees-Mogg on or Nadine Dorries. So the fact that they couldn't get one of the high priests of this cult suggests that although they're going to have their little conference a week tomorrow, maybe
the
they
Nazi
don't.
Conference.
Yeah, maybe. Well, no, this is the different one, I think.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. You need to be careful. YouTube are going to bollock you again.
I'm in enough trouble.
Yeah, it could well be that they're going to go for it, but they sort of think they're probably not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, Alex mentioned the Medway result there. So I might as well explain that for people who are wondering why people might make such a fuss of an individual council. So first of all, Medway is in Kent. Now, this is Nigel Farage's stomping ground. I don't know that it's the council where Nigel Farage personally lives, but I do know it's somewhere he regularly goes to talk. He puts on things, so the big stop the boats message should be really cutting through to people in Medway. It's one of the it's like there's an estuary there. It's, it's one of those coastal areas, southeast of England, where the stop the boat should really be cutting through. And yet, the Conservatives have had this council for 20 years, 20 years solid. Before that, it was no overall control. So ever since Labour did have it when they won the general election, but as soon as they won it, the year later, they lost control of the council. 20 years ago, the Conservatives gained it, and it's been solid from ever since. Normally, when the party in government loses control of a council, it usually goes over to no overall control. But this one has been smashed. It's flipped directly to Labour control and comfortably Labour control.
Wow.
So that, if anywhere is a barometer of whether stop the boats is working, that was it. And the other one, of course, would be Jonathan Gullis's Stoke-on-Trent, completely wiped out. The Tories are actually wiped out there.
Yeah.
And he was one of their main culture warriors.
Yeah. It's not working, is it? Which is good because it shows that their culture wars nonsense isn't working, which is what they were relying on to try and, get through to the next election. Just a big shout out to Ken M, who's dropped £2 into the super chat. Thank you very much, Ken. Also, Flint Reed is saying, my daughter is keeping my granddaughter out of school for the coronation. I could not be more proud as an anti-monarchist. And also, Hugh is saying that Hugh is awaiting the Greens and how they've done in Reigate and Banstead, Surrey local council. It's their daughter's area. And Duke Vengeance, unfortunately, is saying my hometown of Tory voting snobs have stayed Tory. But Shiazek 32 wants to know how your ward went. Word on the ground is that formerly safe Tory seat turned into a bit of a battleground. So how did your ward do, Phil?
Mine? Do you know what? In my ward, no one even campaigned, Labour or the Conservatives, no one, because it was never going to change. And in fact, my whole area, North Lincolnshire, it's just, I think Labour have gained a couple of seats. That's it.
So it's proper Tory.
It's proper Tory. You know, the Tories are well in control of this council. Labour have gained a couple of seats, but, you know, most of the wards, it's still comfortably Tory.
What's the story in North Lincolnshire? That includes Grimsby, doesn't it?
No, that's North East Lincolnshire.
Oh, okay, that's a separate thing. Okay,
yes.
So what's the thing in North Lincolnshire? Why do they vote Tory around your place?
Do you know what?
Lead in the pipes?
I will be fair, in my particular ward, although the local councillors are Tory councillors, they are actually quite good. It's like my partner says, it's just a shame that they don't realise they shouldn't be Tory. So it is not only a traditionally Tory area, but the actual councillors do their jobs reasonably well. You know, people can't really complain about the way the councils run. In fact, North Lincolnshire Council in general, I've lived in a few places, it's not badly run at all. So, yeah, I think it's just, it'll be partly satisfaction with the job their actual council's doing and the fact that it is sort of Tory.
Yeah, sort of Tory.
And it's one of those things where these people will just allow themselves to be convinced that Labour are worse, however bad things are. It's always, I mean, like Greg Hans was on the news today. He is putting down the terrible results to Putin. It's all his fault.
Yes,
and these are the sort of people around here who will believe it.
That was on Nick Ferrari, wasn't it? Was that Nick Ferrari? And he said,
"No, I think it might have even been the BBC."
Well, he was saying the same thing. Then he said it to Nick Ferrari this morning, and Nick Ferrari said, "What has Putin got to do with Medway County Council?" Which I thought was really funny.
But it may have been. I've seen so many. But yeah, there are people that will just believe the blame when the Conservatives are in power, and when Labour are in power, everything that goes wrong is clearly their fault. But also they ignore all the things that go well.
Yeah, typical. So, what would you say things that we should be looking out for in the next few hours? I mean, you were speaking yesterday about the fact that the Labour councils were coming quite fast at the beginning because it's more urban. The rural counties will take longer to count.
Yeah, there may be recounts as well. In fact, one really, I don't know whether this is bad in terms of the voter suppression. There was one place where Labour missed out taking control of a council by 2 votes.
2 votes.
2 votes.
Blimey.
That ward would have swung it for them. Now, we don't know, because we don't know whether voter suppression is hurting Labour or the Conservatives more. We can suspect Labour more. It could be that without and there were people, of course, there've been people turned away everywhere. But you think to yourself, has voter suppression affected that result straight away?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I think from the sound of things, from the stories that were coming out yesterday on Twitter, plural of anecdotes and data, but there were just as many Tory voters being potential Tory voters being turned away from
maybe just because it's so many elderly people. Yeah.
And I think the Tories expected older people just to have the correct ID in their personal wallet, and it wasn't always the case. But the stories of disabled elderly people making their way to the polls and then being turned away, it just make me sick.
And they're way less likely to come back because it's such a struggle to get out in the first place.
Yeah, indeed.
Whereas someone like, and this is why I've thought right from the start this could actually hurt the Tories more than Labour, because you think to yourself, the people affected are more likely to be people who are poor and don't have the ID. And you think naturally Labour supporters, but a lot of things have changed. And the Conservatives have been making a direct pitch to people on poor incomes, particularly uneducated people, whereas Labour appeal much more to the middle classes. And the thing about middle classes is, if you've got a driving licence, you sort of naturally keep it in your wallet or your purse. It's just an easy thing to carry around with you. I don't even need to remember to take it. When I go out, I have my wallet. My wallet has my driving licence in it.
Yeah.
So there's zero way that I would forget, because I don't need to remember. It's naturally with me. Whereas someone who has to take a passport or something, well, you've got to actually be aware you need it and remember to take it.
Yeah, and there were stories of passports not being accepted in cases where they were out of date. Which is mad, because they were supposed to be allowing that. One of the stories I saw was that a woman took her passport as ID, but because it had her maiden name on it, not her married name, they wouldn't let her vote.
Right. See, something like that, and there are links to people like that need to contact their returning officers and make a complaint.
Yeah.
Because that person's eligible to vote and has had the ID that the government have said and their polling card said would be valid.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing about, if you've been married or changed your name at all, that you can't use it. It just has to be a good likeness of you. In fact, that's where the driving license falls down, because you're not allowed to have any expression on a driving license. So I look like a serial killer on mine. And in fact, I handed it to the guy and I could see him frowning. But he took my word for it that it was me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Driving licenses are actually a very poor likeness.
Yeah, no, I saw another story as well about people being turned back because they had the wrong bus pass. Like, if they'd used the national bus pass, they could have voted, but because they used the local bus pass, they couldn't vote.
Things like that, that is also people knowing that they need certain types of ID and being confused as to what form. It's been so bad. I cannot see how, if there's enough of a public backlash to force an investigation or a judicial review, I don't see how the government come out of this one.
Yeah.
At all.
Well, also, one of the most shocking ones I saw, and this was talked about on the James O'Brien show this morning, was people who were immunosuppressed and couldn't take their masks off, to prove who they were, who they said they were, in the polling station. And there was one case where a woman actually filmed herself on a phone putting the mask on and then showed them the video, and they still wouldn't let her vote.
See, there was supposed to be specific provision for things like that.
Well, there wasn't.
No, I mean, that will therefore be illegal, because there was supposed to be specific provision. So that suggests to me that the law has clearly been broken.
Well, yeah, I mean, the law that...
And that person needs to complain.
I mean, the other law that's come out this week as well, which we should mention, is the anti-protest laws, which, along with not being able to glue yourself to stuff, says you can't link arms. And I just want to make this point, that it's between a 6-month sentence and a 12-month sentence if you get jail for it. But also, the fine is unlimited, Phil. The fine is... So if you pump shit into our rivers, the fine is limited. Get this straight, right? But if you link arms, just link arms with the person next to you at a protest, the fine can be unlimited. I know in real life, they're not going to fine you.
Well, no, because judges are not as crazy as politicians.
Yeah,
usually.
But that there is just, it blows my mind that they've put this through. And they're like, yeah, job done. We've done a good thing there. And still people are defending these monsters in government who have taken away our freedom of movement, taken away our freedom to protest, want to take away our freedoms to strike, and they want to take away our freedom to vote as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm just hoping that a lot of people see the effectively theft of votes here and are more determined to vote. And maybe even some of their friends who are into voting will go, hang on, that's disgusting, and turn out and vote next year. I hope there's a real bad reaction for the Tories as a result of this.
Yeah. But it doesn't seem like anyone was really taking note of how many people were turned away.
Well, they were supposed to, but what's been happening in a lot of places, and I said to you this in advance, we already knew this was supposed to be happening, is that they were going to be heading them off before they got into the polling station by filter. Like, have you got your ID? So the people who said, no, what you're on about, didn't ever get to the person recording it. Now, that is also dodgy. That potentially should be illegal because it was stated by the government that records would be made.
Yeah.
And it's like, they are being made. If you, let's say you've met by a greeter, a Walmart greeter, and they say, do you have your ID? If you say none of your business, they can't stop you. You carry on going through. You say it politely because it's not their fault. And then say you haven't got it to make sure you're recorded, that's fine. But only so many people are going to do that. And by and large, the people who would know to do that are the people who knew you needed ID and probably had it anyway.
Yeah.
So the people who are actually being caught unawares will go to that greeter. Have you got your ID? No. What? Oh, you need ID.
Didn't know.
And then never get through to them. Yeah. And that's deliberate so the government can claim the issue wasn't as bad as people made, although it's quite clear that the issue will, because even with the much smaller number formally recorded, I'm sure it'll be, someone made a point yesterday, I think it's a good point. What will have happened is yesterday, we'll have had more people turned away than has ever committed electoral fraud, ever.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a very good point. So yeah, this is really an affront to democracy. And I hate it when people go, "Oh, but that's the system they have in France. That's the system they have in other countries." I'm like, yeah, they have mandatory ID cards in France.
And
everyone
they
has
know
ID.
they need them. They know they need them for voting. We should have had the government should have sent letters personally addressed to every registered voter, and it should have been, and that letter should have said, for future elections, from the very next election, you are going to need photo ID. This is the list of ID you need. If you're not sure, contact your council. If you don't have any of it, here is how you get it.
Yeah.
And it should have had that, and it didn't. And we've never had any of that. The government have made zero attempt to make sure everyone had the ID and zero attempt to make sure everyone knew they needed the ID.
Absolutely. Well, as Plum Duff says, welcome to dystopia. QA Library says, I voted at 21:45 last night and they accepted my ID of driving license of a very bad photo and 2 or 3 years out of date. I should state that on my driving license picture, it is over 10 years out of date and I have a full head of hair. So good luck with that. People not knowing shows how deliberate it is, says Flint, which I can't disagree with. Hughes says, greasers and meters, better known as nightclub bouncers and bailiffs and security guards contracted out by Serco, etc. And Flint says, I got nothing telling me how to get an ID or that I would need one. I found out through YouTubers.
Yeah. The government made very little to zero effort to tell people.
But why wasn't there a nationwide mail shot to everybody saying, clearly, piece of paper goes to everyone's door saying you will need ID to vote?
Because the government, this is voter suppression, that's what it's aimed for. So when people said things like that, when opposition MPs said, well, you should do this or this or this, they went, no, not necessary.
Yeah. Big shout out
to Flint. They tried to downplay the number of people who wouldn't have it.
So big shout out to Flint for £10 super chat. Thank you very much. Solidarity chaps. Pick up your hammers and folks. This state won't smash itself, which is a great expression. I might use that myself in the future. Thanks very much, Flint. So yeah, so we feel like this was voter suppression. Look, we're looking at the anecdotal evidence. We're looking at stories, and if Edwin Haywood on Twitter can put together 70 examples of people saying they saw people getting turned away or they got turned away themselves, that is way more number of people than have ever been convicted for.
If a single person was turned away, that is more than committed fraud in the whole of last year.
Wow.
So,
but what can be done? Like, what's the process now?
A lot of people need to complain. There needs to be a public backlash. I'm sure various groups will organise to try and get petitions to go together. But But ultimately, I mean, there's a heartening thing about this is that despite the voter suppression, and it may overall help the Tories, we'll never know, but the Tories are still getting hammered. So you've also got to think that a lot of people have now been forewarned about this. And this is what I hoped. I hoped that at least it would forewarn people so that come the general election, people knew. My worry is because turnout is so much lower in a local election, that most of the vast majority of the people voting would be, well, actually all the people voting would have had their ID because otherwise there's no way of voting. But the vast majority of people who attempted to vote would be more politically interested and therefore more likely to know that they needed it.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a Tory MP who shot herself in the foot yesterday. She actually tweeted that she had to go back because she forgot her ID. And I'm thinking, well, you're one of the people who created this law. If it's almost in your mind, what do you think it's like for people who had no idea?
Exactly. Most people who aren't interested in politics to this extent. The Conservatives are down 288 seats now, as we're talking. Lee is saying in France, every voter is supplied with a card with their photo and details, and it's stamped in detail for each election for a period of time. We've also got people suggesting a text warning system to let people know they need a voter ID.
Yeah, and also they could have done that as part of that test, couldn't they? Which a load of people didn't get anyway.
Yeah, Richard Brophy saying, why not signs on the motorway, etc., which we had to get ready for Brexit in October 2019, even though we didn't leave with no deal, which was what the Tories wanted us to do in 2019. The Tories tried to ape the GOP to suppress voting, just more carelessly and more transparently. That's from Pete.
It's not finished either, because there is more suppression to come. For example, if you think to yourself, well, I've got a postal vote, I'm fine. No, because now it'll wear out. After 3 years, it'll wear out. So people might think they've got a postal vote for it worked for this time, and they might think it'll work for next year, but it may expire. And that's a classic American voter suppression, just taking people off the register. That's the same thing.
Absolutely. We got another super chat in from Flint saying Labour need to message and help people get their ID for free months before the general election. I absolutely agree with that, Flint. Thank you very much for the super chat. But I don't think that Labour did enough to let people know they needed ID for this local election.
Well, they didn't do enough to get through to enough voters. The problem is a lot of the people who had been most affected are like elderly shut-ins, really. And they're not. They've not got a lot of access to the news.
Well, one of the reasons we've set up this channel, Phil, is because Labour are not getting their messages out very well. Now, if they did have something like this officially on the Labour channel, where they have people talking about what's happening in politics and getting this kind of viewership and subscriber level, they could say to people, hey, could you go to our website? We've got an A4 sheet to print out at home. Most people have got printers now after COVID because we're all working from home. Just print out, 60 of these and go down your street and just post one of these in each letterbox to say, you don't forget your ID to vote. And that kind of mobilization, it's not a lot. It's not asking people for a lot. It's not going to cost people an arm and a leg. It's not going to take them a very long time. But it can change things. And as Flint points out, between the super chats that Flint gave, he said, if we all smash a little bit, we can get it done in no time. And I'm a firm believer in that. But I do feel like, at the same time, Labour needs to use the tools at its disposal. I'm not calling us tools, Phil, in order to get through to people that it wouldn't normally be able to get through to.
I mean, I know my local constituency party, which is a different one. I was in Scunthorpe in the last election. They did actually send out forms for postal voting with the address to the council, not themselves, unlike the Tories. And I'm sure lots of others will do the same for the next general election. But, and I'm going to guess at the next general election, they'll also accompany it with a note saying, postal voting means you don't need ID, but if you don't use postal voting, you are going to need ID. How you make sure yours is up to date and that you have one of these types. But it's just really, it is. I'm looking for some interesting.
Lofty the Softy says, just apply for postal vote. It gives you the option to vote by post indefinitely, which is something that's definitely worth doing because you don't need ID for that.
It's not indefinitely, though. As I just said,
Oh.
there's from this October, there's supposed to be, it'll expire after 3 years. So again, the voter suppression wasn't just the voter ID. There were other things in there as well.
It's unbelievable. They're trying to make it more difficult for people to vote. End
yes.
of. So
yes.
what can happen from this? Can there be a court case? Can we take
the
government to court
if there were
democracy?
So if there were enough people who complained, say, and a solicitor or barrister wanted to pursue a class action on behalf of people affected, then they could ask for a judicial review. That would be my preferred option, because the thing with the Electoral Commission is now that it is no longer independent, even if they have an investigation, I'm not sure how much confidence I would have that it could be a proper investigation. Sure. So I would actually favour someone bringing a judicial review, but I don't think it can be something like the Good Law Project sometimes would do things like this. I think it would have to be, because there's been changes to the law.
Yeah.
So I think it would have to be, they'd have to be acting on behalf of affected people. So you'd need a lot of people to have sort of, I mean, it may be that a barrister or solicitor, like the Good Law Project, just says, if you know anyone affected, get them to contact us so that they can build up a list of names.
Right. Yeah, that would be good.
I don't know whether they are looking at that.
We've got Flint Reed pointing out that this is where Momentum got it right. They had the policies and messaging out there. People may have hated them, but we all knew what they were saying. Can't argue with that. Mad Monk 33 says that every year I get a letter from the Scottish Electoral Register to check if everyone was registered to vote in local and general elections. And Freckle Puny says, just saw the Weasel Sunak saying there is no rush towards Labour or their policies, so attack others when your own performance was poor.
Yeah, but they're always going to do that. Labour, I mean, they were both out early, Sunak and Starmer. Starmer saying this shows we're going to win the general election. Sunak saying, in fact, Sunak's was really bizarre because he was saying, even though he had to admit it was disappointing, he was still saying, this shows that people want us to carry on doing the same thing. And it's like, they said that last year with Boris Johnson. Oh, this result proves that we need to carry on doing what we're doing. It's like, no, that's not what it means at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just wonder if publicly they say that, but the thing is, even saying it publicly and privately recognizing they've messed up, it's just there'll be conservative voters who stayed at home. There'll be conservative voters who, out of frustration, voted for the Lib Dems. All you're doing is pissing them off.
Yeah.
I don't understand the strategy of that. Like Johnny Mercer, I gave him the award for bravest face today because his Plymouth, not all of them were up for grabs, thank goodness for him. But there were 9 Tory councillors going for re-election and only one of them got it. So he lost 8 of 9 candidates that were standing.
Wow.
And he was saying, we need to sort of learn and come back tomorrow and I'm up for the fight. And you think, yeah, that's fine. But your boss is saying, no, we actually need to learn no lessons.
The important thing is nobody learned anything.
Exactly.
It's like an episode of The Simpsons.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what do you think? Because you did a video this morning about Boris's lot, who obviously want to bring Boris Johnson back into politics. Do you think that's a realistic prospect?
No.
Do you think that's something that could actually happen?
No. The best thing from our point of view is if there are enough Tory MPs who get worried that Sunak is going to cost them their seat and they start causing internal trouble. There is zero prospect of them bringing Boris Johnson back because despite what his little echo chamber, which admittedly admits a lot of the mainstream media say, he's not popular with the public at all. His popularity has not increased. He's shat the bed really badly and he hasn't cleaned it up, so it's smelling quite a lot now.
Oh, thanks for that image.
He's he's made no effort to even ingratiate himself with the public again. Like when he did that video yesterday, or it may have been the day before, but I saw it yesterday, where he was and he should be dealt with by the police. I noticed Derbyshire police have said there's no evidence he was doing it in their area. That is the problem with police chasing this up. You've got to find where he was and say to the police he was here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they don't want to know.
Yeah.
Rishi Sunak made the mistake of identifying his own location. But you could see in that video of Boris Johnson, he said he'd been campaigning for during the local election period. He was like, bollocks, has he? And I'll tell you how I know. First of all, in the photo, you could see he was sort of sunburnt around his face, but with a sunglasses sized and shaped thing there.
Yeah, he's definitely not been up he's not been up north, has he? Look at the weather today.
He's a terrible self-publicist. So I checked his Twitter, nothing. If he'd have been out, he'd have tweeted about it. He's not been anywhere.
Yeah.
So it was all nonsense. He hasn't gone. Basically, he's been dragged out of bed to do a promo and said, look, you know, it can't be worse than James Cleverly's. Just get out there and do something. I went, all right then.
Yeah, indeed. We got a few more comments. Houghton125 is saying you'll make Nadine cry with that kind of talk, Phil.
I really don't care.
And Hughes saying Greg Hands reminds me of Sid James in Carrying Up the Khyber. The Kazi is revolting. Rab says, Rab, I should say, says nobody learns anything. Sounds like the Tory educational policy. Pay the teachers a fair wage. Absolutely. And yeah, and then Feckle Puny saying bit harsh on weasels. I think responding to Fishy Sunak being called a weasel. And William is also pointed out to Pete that until last year, the Electoral Commission in the UK was independent. Yeah, the Electoral Commission, along with the BBC and other parts of our public infrastructure, have been turned over to the Tory party in ways that no other party would get away with. And that's what annoys me the most about the Tories.
Well, no other party would have wanted to.
I know, but if they did, and this is,
Yeah.
I think, the big difference between the Tories and Labour and the Lib Dems and the Greens and any other party and the SNP even, they can't get away with stuff the way that the Tories do.
No.
The Tories get away with absolute murder and the media give them a free ride.
Well, you could see, I mean, talking about the SNP, so there's obviously criminal investigations into what's been going on with their finances.
Yeah.
And you think that's fine. And that's because that's the Scottish police, got nothing to do with the Home Office, that's nothing to do with the Tories. And they're doing their job. And we're now getting reports that they were searching for what? Like a razor and a wheelbarrow. We're getting really detailed information on what they were looking for.
Yeah.
Michelle Moan's house was raided a year ago. Where's the updates on that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Where are the updates? So the SNP are being properly investigated by the police that are, you know, effectively overseen by the Scottish government, which is the SNP.
Yeah.
And they're doing a proper job.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could argue we're getting too much information, but still. And yet the police who should be investigating Tory scroungers, nothing. Yeah. What? I mean, okay, there's an investigation, apparently. I've not heard that it's closed.
Why wasn't
I've not heard any updates.
I don't know if it was at the time or anything, but was there any kind of where the people, the police officers who were stationed outside Number 10 during all the parties when the rest of us were locked down, were they ever brought to book? Were they ever reprimanded for their role?
No.
That's shocking. That is absolutely shocking.
Well, it wouldn't have been those who should have been reprimanded. It was their commanders. Those officers will absolutely have phoned in and said, there seems to be a bit of a party here.
Right.
Bit naughty. What should we do about it? And their commander will have said, do nothing. So it won't have been the police officers stationed outside who were at fault.
Fair enough. But I mean, we haven't had that hearing, have we? We haven't had that.
There's not going
standing
to be
up
one.
In front of
this is not going to happen.
Who? A judge, select committee? I don't know. And saying, well, why did you let the party go ahead? Oh, because I phoned my commander.
Yeah, no, this is not
good. The commander can face consequences for his or her decision there. All this kind of stuff is quite disturbing. And someone's put in the chat, does it remind anyone of the Norse Fire party from V for Vendetta? And I'm like, yeah, William, yeah, it really does. It's all getting a bit that way at the moment as we are creeping towards what I see as authoritarianism.
I've just seen a comment. I'll just pick up there. It says, based on the results of this election, does Phil still believe the general election is October 2024? I will just say, I never said I believe it would be 2024. I was saying that all the journalists thought it would be autumn 2024. And I have to defer. They talk to people. They know more than I do. But I just thought strategically summer 2024 makes more sense. If you wait until autumn, you've got, when are most of the small boat crossings? Summer. If you wait till autumn, you've also got problems building up in the NHS again. Remember, last year, the winter crisis began in late summer. And I don't imagine it's going to get any better this year or next year. So I just think the Tories, I don't see what they have to gain by waiting till autumn.
Yeah.
I think they're much better having it next summer. And the other thing is, if they have it any later, because I noticed there's some Tories talking about June, and it's like, yeah, but if you do that, you're then doing it off the back of another set of potentially damaging local elections. And albeit I don't know.
There's no ideal time for them though, really, is there?
There isn't. But at the same time, if you think you're going to lose anywhere, you pick where you're going to lose the least so that you've got an easier rebuild job for the next election.
The Tories have just jumped to minus 295 councillors, so maybe they'll get up to minus 300 by the end of this broadcast. And a big shout out to Alexander Campbell there in the super chat saying, also, where is the probe into PPE fraud? No updates.
No, this is what see, when Labour come to power, I mean, part of me thinks we will probably won't get anything, but there's an awful lot of completely independent, arm's length public inquiries they could order. I think the one they should order, you can't do them all. I think the one they should order is actually into pandemic handling. And I think they could justify it because we need to learn for the next one. We're still expecting another one.
Yeah.
So it still remains the number one threat to the nation, as it has been for over a decade. So they can do it from the basis that we don't think because the Conservatives didn't carry out their own investigation, we don't feel adequately prepared for another one. So we're going to order a full blood and guts public inquiry. And the justification is so that we can prepare and implement recommendations. But it will absolutely destroy the Tories' reputation. Yeah. Because the stuff that will come out of that will be mind-blowing.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that the Tory party, do you think it, I know this might be a bit early for asking this question, but do you think it can survive?
I think it will survive because the money's there. If you look at something like GB News, you think, how does GB News survive?
Well, just loses
There's
money.
no advertising revenue. People are pumping in the money because it's their representative. The same will be true of the Tory party. Yes, they'll struggle because there's different types of donors. There's the honest donors, you might say, who are, in fact, there's three types of donors. There's the honest donors who are honest in terms of the fact they genuinely think a Conservative government is better for the country or for them, but they don't expect anything out of it other than that the Conservative Party is attuned to them. They're no different to me voting for Labour. The other type are the ones who expect something in return. And obviously those are the donations the Tories are losing at the moment because you're not going to get a return very soon. And the other type would be, and it's not supposed to happen, but I noticed there were attempts to add an amendment to some legislation to make it so that political parties had to take serious efforts to make sure they weren't being tainted by foreign money. Now, even Conservative MPs were in favour of this, but surprise, surprise, the government whipped their MPs to vote against it.
Oh my God. When was that?
I think this was earlier this week.
I didn't even...
I think it was Wednesday. I think it may have been Wednesday.
Bloody hell. Have you made a video about this?
No.
Are you going to?
I don't know. There's quite a lot of other things happening.
Oh my God. It's like there's too much corruption for us to keep up with.
It is. I mean, this one's really, I mean, you can like, I think I might, because I want to talk about Rishi Sunak's investigation. Yeah. Now that after the local elections, presumably there'll be no embargo on that anymore. So I might sneak it into there.
Yeah.
But But yeah, so it's like, well, why would the Conservatives be opposed to measures which force political parties to make sure that they're not receiving foreign donations?
Money from the Russians and the Saudi Arabians.
Yes, basically.
Why indeed, Phil? Why indeed? Sam Saw saying, popcorn ready. What did I miss? All these shows are available to watch on Catch Up. Don't worry about that. We're seeing Houghton 125 is saying, can see Sunak ending up calling one at the Rebels election, start causing chaos for him, a bit of a John Major back me or sack me moment. I don't know. I mean, it would be the Tories' wet dream. The Labour Party's wet dream if the Tories start falling into infighting after this election.
Labour have gained Swindon.
Ooh.
From the Conservatives. Hang on. So how many councils is that? I want to know the council numbers. So
89 councils have been
Swindon. Fully declared.
Tunbridge Wells stays under no other control. Yeah, Labour win in Swindon. Swindon is now a Labour council.
And that's not Redwall. So no. That's quite handy.
Labour are on 33 councils now. And that's a change of 5 so far, plus 5. And the Conservatives have lost 15 councils so far. And 294 councillors. Obviously, that's gone back down again. Oh, Feckle Puny has thrown £5 into the super chat. Thank you very much, Feckle Puny. You're a legend. Heebie-jeebies and Pork TV are lost leaders. They will last as long as they are useful to their backers, similar to the Tories and their donors. I couldn't agree more.
But I mean, the Tories don't have anyone else for the rich.
What do you mean?
Well, like if you're incredibly wealthy and you want representation in Parliament, there's nowhere else for them to back. So that's why the Conservatives can't just disappear up their own arse, because they'll always have that backing.
I wish they would. I mean, could you see the party splitting in two, especially if PR is brought in?
Yeah, if PR is brought in, absolutely. Why not? Because there's no reason. There's no reason not to. There's no reason not to. Because it's the same with Labour. The broad church exists because it's the only way to win with first past the post.
Yeah. But I mean, the broad church, I think, in a lot of ways, I mean, the Tories still managed to hold it together. I think Labour really struggle with some of the people on the extremes.
It's because, and it's sort of a nice thing in a way, it's often said, it's because Labour are very driven by principles, and it sometimes blinds you to, a lot of people prioritise what they want to achieve over what they can achieve. Whereas for the Tories, the principle is power, because they don't actually want to govern. They just want to stop others governing. And that's always been the case. Before Labour, it was the Whigs, whoever it was, anyone that wants to govern, they're seat fillers. That's all they are. They just sit there and go, how do you want to run the country? Oh, no, we don't want to run the country. We just want to stop others running the country.
Indeed. Big shout out to Flint Reed there. Dropped another £10 in the super chat. Thank you so much. Can we please get a government that throws out foreign meddlers in our media and government and makes it a crime with real consequences?
Yes,
Rupert
please.
comes to mind. Also ban offshoring profits.
Yeah.
I just want to tell you that I got told off the other day for referring to Rupert Murdoch as an Australian. Even though he was an Australian, but now he's got American citizenship.
American citizen, yeah.
But it was an Aussie going, we don't want him. We don't want to even acknowledge that he came from our country.
Well, he's done a fair amount of damage in Australia as well.
Well, at least the Australian Labour Party have gone after him and really tried to break up his monopoly over there.
I think we might see. I don't think it makes sense to provoke an explicit war from opposition. But you just think, Keir Starmer, first of all, I mean, he hasn't made any attempt to get close to the media barons. Second, Murdoch hates his guts because Starmer tried to put Rebecca Brooks in prison. And you just think it's, I think Starmer wants to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we're not going to find anything. It's the sort of thing you don't have to put in your manifesto either.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Swindon, a town where Honda pulled out as a result of hard Tory Brexit. No wonder the Tories lost there. People blame the Tories for this catastrophe, and rightly so. That's from Tim.
In fact, what's been noted, and I'm sure it hasn't changed with this afternoon's flurry of results, is that Labour have been doing best, making the biggest gains in Leave voting areas, and the Tories have been making their greatest losses in Remain voting areas. So in other words, it's unfortunate, but we sort of know why Labour don't like talking about Brexit.
Yeah.
But the fact that the Tories do like talking about Brexit, it's not working in the Leave voting areas because they're knackered areas and the cost of living is the more important issue, but it's actively hurting them in sort of the Remain voting Tory areas. Brilliant. Who will happily flip to the Lib Dems.
Yeah, well, talking to the Lib Dems, Tim Balance just said the Greens have taken... Well, Lib Dems, I'll talk about the Greens. Tim Balance saying the Greens have taken the Forest of Dean. Don't think Mark Harper will keep his seat. That's fantastic news there. And, do you think these results could provide Sunak with a good pretext for an extensive reshuffle? That's from Martin. Now, there was a suggestion on the radio this morning that we could see the end of Suella Braverman this week because she could be the sacrificial lamb to say, oh, well, obviously her policies have gone a bit too far because her policies are just evil. I mean, she dreams about sending people to Rwanda.
Yeah. Her policies are expensive and all the Tory MPs know they won't work. They know that. They know it's red meat and it's not worked. And privately, publicly can say what they like. Privately, Tory MPs must know that it's not going to work. And because they know their policies aren't going to work, Sunak had to recently admit that they're not going to work publicly. Because they know that, they know they're not going to go into next year's election saying, oh, we had this plan and it works brilliantly, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, they also know it's not going to work saying, well, Labour voted against it. Yeah, did Labour voting against it change anything? No, it didn't, because you've got the majority. Yeah. So they know that I was just saying to you before we went on stream, the Office for National Statistics, I've got rid of it now. The Office for National Statistics have brought out a poll on what are the most important issues for people. And it's things like the cost of living, the NHS, the price of food, the price of fuel, the economy. It's not small boats. It's not asylum. It's not even immigration.
Yeah.
It's none of these things.
Outdoor XP has put it in the chat. I quite like the idea from economist Daniel Chandler. I saw this in an interview that he did. Someone's saying microphone's quiet. I'll turn it up. There you go. Is that better? It's probably gone distorted now. Saying that after implementing PR, he said the state would gift every person a certain amount of money, like a voucher, to fund any party that they choose. So you're not allowed any kind of private lobbying or gifts or anything like that from a private lobbyist. Every citizen gets a voucher. He said for £50. I think that might be a bit much if you think about like how many millions of people there are in the country. But yeah, you get a voucher and you can give that to a political party of your choice, which would be a better way of funding our system than the current system, which is you've got all these politicians begging for money, and then when they get the money, they're in the pocket of the people who gave them the money.
Yeah. Yeah, I, whatever system you use, I'm very much in favour of public funding of political. It doesn't even have to be political parties. If there might be some independents, that's fine as well. That works, But public funding of politicians and certainly take away the big donations. I don't think there's any justification for that.
Talking about being in someone's pocket, Alexander Campbell, I'm forever in your debt because you just put £2 in the super chat. Let the lawsuits have their pop at Murdoch first. Talking about going after Murdoch.
I mean, I don't think there'll be any real lawsuits, but if we just ban him and his ilk from... Basically, I would have it. So, and I know you can't do this straight away because all the mainstream media would collapse. So you've got to do it bit by bit, haven't you? That's the problem.
Yeah.
But I would want to work towards a position where you cannot have a major stake or a senior position, even as an editor in any media outlet in this country, unless you are resident in this country. And I would say for 10 months in the year, I'd be proper harsh on it.
Yeah.
I think you'd have to be resident because you can't. I wouldn't necessarily say you have to be a UK citizen. I would say you'd have to be resident in this country for 10 months of the year. I think that's perfectly reasonable. Allows business trips and a holiday.
You couldn't be a non-dom. You couldn't have non-dom status.
Oh, well, non-dom.
No way.
No one's going to be a non-dom when Labour are back in. That's one of their firm policies. There's no such thing. Because people need to understand as well. This is not like a Marxist idea. Other countries don't have non-dom status. It's not normal to have it. So, that's what I would do, because then, you've got people like Rothmere or Murdoch. It's like, right, which country do you want to be resident in? Well, Murdoch, the biggest pie is in America, so he'll choose there. Rothmere, it's like, do I have to move back to the Plague
Britain.
Island? Bloody hell, no, I'd rather sell. I'd rather sell. So,
I'd rather stay in France.
Yeah.
And,
we've got clean rivers.
Being sad that it's no longer the Vichy French regime. By the way, the Tories are down to 299. They're down 299 seats from the last election. So we might clock over 300 during this live show, which fingers crossed there. And also people are talking about in Germany, party donations are tightly regulated, but in return, any party gets money from the state proportionate to their election results, which is another way of doing it as well. I think the idea that The Economist had about vouchers is that would help out smaller parties like the Greens and things. But I mean, look, I don't want Nigel Farage's new party to get £50 million off the taxpayer.
There wouldn't be a million people that would give it to him, but I don't mind that. I
50 million.
I don't care. I wouldn't get it, but I wouldn't care if he did, because it's because if they can stop it coming from people who clearly don't have the best interest of the country at heart, that's enough for me. And political activity needs funding, so the funding has to come from somewhere. And this is what I mean with proportional representation. Nigel Farage will be in Parliament. Good, says I. He got away with being an MEP and not turning up because his own supporters. It's a bit like the UKIP and then the Brexit Party were to the European Parliament what Sinn Féin is to Northern Ireland, or to Westminster, more specifically, I should say, rather, in that, their supporters back them for not attending. Whereas they wouldn't back him for not attending British Parliament. So he'd have to turn up and do some bloody work. Well, pretend to do some work.
Wasn't he on like the Fisheries Commission for the EU?
He turned up to
one meeting.
Like 40 meetings or something.
I'm laughing, but oh my God, what a menace! What a menace to our democracy.
Man claimed that he represented fishermen. It's like he couldn't even represent us on the Fisheries Committee.
Bad Bones is saying, is it wrong? I'm pretty happy so far today. I mean, all those poor councillors. Don't worry about the councillors. It's not a full-time job. You don't get paid for it. You just get about
you do get some money.
£6,000 for expenses.
I still say, and I said earlier on, even if they're hardworking and genuinely civic-minded and they're just like a bit confused, I say don't have any sympathy for them, because they're standing under their party's banner, and they've done that because in the good times they get elected. So they have to accept that in the bad times they'll lose.
Well, Labour's held on to Leeds. They've held on to North Tyneside in the last few moments. The Tories have held East Cambridgeshire. But Labour have held
somewhere in Staffordshire. They've lost to Labour, though, I think. I don't know where that was. Hold on. I know where Staffordshire is. What I mean is I'm trying to find where I'd seen that. I've got so many windows, and I don't know where my feed is anymore for the latest news.
I tried to open another window on my computer, but your feed slowed down and your sound started distorting. So I was like, close. So I'm actually on my phone checking the updates. Big shout out to Salty Dagger there for €6 super chat. Hey guys, big fan of you both. I hope we can welcome you back to the EU very soon. Let's go Labour. Love and respect from Germany. Thank you so much. Dankeschön. To Salty Dagger there. And yes, I hope we do get back to the EU sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it was East Staffordshire Labour gained from the Conservatives.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh yes, we just hit 300. The Tories have lost 300 councillors. It's just turned over to 300.
Yeah.
I don't know what the 300th was. Milton Keynes.
Well, that'll just be the individual seats. I mean, we could
Yeah.
get individual seats being declared before the full council is.
Well, yeah, it might go down again as well, depending on how many they win or lose in the next few. But they've lost 300 at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they're not likely to. I mean, they will gain because, like in 2019, when Theresa May was in charge, there will have been some Conservative voters who just didn't vote just because of the utter chaos that was happening to their party. And now that it looks like it's more sensibly, or at least more stable, they'll turn out and they'll get those seats back. But it's going to be very few. So although they'll be going, oh, we've gained some seats here, well done, you're still losing net
Well
hundreds.
You're still a loser.
You're basically comparing yourself to the second worst local election results for the Conservatives ever, and you're doing worse than that.
I really hate that line. I hate it when parties do badly, or someone does badly in an election. They don't win the election and they say, yeah, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been. We expected to do worse, so it's okay. And it's like that kind of mitigation, it just really winds me up. It's like, you're still lost. You know.
But they've always got to put a positive spin on it. And
we did our best.
The thing is, as I say, the Conservatives, see, they said, I mean, both Labour and the Conservatives did expectation management. Labour said, we'll have done well if we win 400 seats.
Yeah.
If they get anything fewer than 500, they can't crow about it. But they should exceed their very low expectation. Whereas the Conservatives said, we're going to lose 1,000 seats. So it's like, so if they now do lose 1,000, I mean, obviously they expected to have no chance of losing that many. They would think, 700 or 800 maybe. So if they do lose 1,000, they can't claim victory.
Yeah, yeah.
And if they lose, say, 1,200, I mean, 1,200 is on the upper end of realistic. But if they did, and they probably won't, that they can't deny that that's not a disaster.
Yeah, indeed.
But I strongly suspect, because I'm not sensing any massive panic, I strongly suspect that's not the case. But Rishi Sunak, at the end of the day, before the polls opened, he had, from the ones being contested yesterday, bearing in mind there are a few that were cancelled because a candidate died. So I think there's 3 somewhere, I can't remember where, there was a ward with 3 candidates up. But he basically had over 3,300 councillors.
Wow.
As the polls opened yesterday. So at the moment, with how many?
Someone's asked where we're getting our results from. I'm getting them from the BBC website.
I'm getting from all over the place. I've got BBC, The Guardian, and other bits and pieces open as well.
Johnny Comhead's pointing out that Labour now have over 1,000 councillors in this election.
Yeah, and so Labour, they only had 2130 as of yesterday. So at the moment, with fewer than half of the results in, they've got... Oops, okay. They've got about half there. So they'll easily clear. Well, it's just net. People focus on net gains. So that's what needs to be decent. Labour need at least 500, but they'd really like 600 or more.
Yeah.
The Conservatives somehow will spin losing 800 as a victory.
Yeah.
Although the number of councils matters as well, how many councils they lose.
Yeah. There's a lot going to no overall control.
That's fine. That's still a Conservative loss.
Yeah.
They work. And the thing is as well, I mean, if we're going to say if we were going to come up with because Tories have been trying to come out with the copium all morning, and if I was to come up with something slightly more intelligent as a consolation prize for them, I'll say this: in the mid 90s, when the Tories were also doing very badly in local elections, getting hammered because Labour were actually on the road to power then.
Yeah,
there weren't a lot of those went Labour's way because there wasn't really a lot where else for them to go. Whereas this time round, the Lib Dems are making large gains after they made large gains in 2019.
Yeah.
The Green Party are making large gains. They weren't really doing anything, in the mid-90s. Quite a lot of independents are doing well out of it. So the saving grace for the Conservatives is even when they're losing heavily, it's not Labour that are benefiting all the time. They're mostly benefiting, but the Lib Dems, the Greens are softening the blow in terms of how well Labour are doing.
But that's not going to really translate to the national picture because the Lib Dems can't hope to win that many seats.
That's the other saving grace for them. Right in the local elections. So there may be some constituencies, Tory constituencies, where they're losing the councils to the Lib Dems or they're losing seats to the Lib Dems. Whereas for the general election, it's not as big a deal because the Lib Dems, you say, they can only target so many seats.
Yeah.
And also, in the general election, people go to the polls, they sort of know it's to vote for the government, even though you are just voting for a candidate. It's sort of to vote for the government. And there'll be Conservative voters who will still judge a bad Conservative government to be better than a Labour government. And they'll flip back to their Conservative candidate in the Westminster elections. Whereas in the local elections, it's like, well, I don't mind, because a Liberal Democrat council is a realistic prospect. And they know that although Labour like the idea of the Conservatives losing, it's not actually directly helping Labour. So I think you can get some moderate right-wing voters supporting the Lib Dems in a local election, but not necessarily in the Westminster elections.
Yeah. But is there a chance that a lot of them are going to stay home in the next election?
Oh, yeah. Because at the end of the day, if you can't, this happened to Labour in the last election because it was like, well, they didn't want to, they wouldn't vote for the Tories, but they couldn't really bring themselves to vote for Labour. The same thing will happen with the Conservatives. They are generally better at getting their support base to turn out, but you would still think that voter apathy, not being fired up by Sunak or finding it difficult to justify voting Conservative given what's happened, even if they don't want to switch that vote elsewhere.
Yeah, true. All right, mate. Well, I think we've whittled on for an hour now, which is good. We actually managed to broadcast for that long. That was so funny. We did actually do the whole preamble and the talk at the beginning and welcome everyone. And I read some comments and then we realised that we weren't actually streaming.
Flint's just commented there, says if we do get a Labour government, will we ever get our rights to free protest back? It's one of these things. The short answer is yes, but the longer answer is bear in mind as soon as Labour come to power, they have to demonstrate immediate benefits to people. So the legislation they will prioritise is whatever is going to make people feel their lives better. Not that many people protest. So although I'm sure it will be, I'm not necessarily expecting a day one repeal. And especially if the legislation itself, if it's not as simple as repealing it, if it's like you have to keep some of it, if it's only like individual bits you need to deal with, that takes more parliamentary time because then you've got to argue the toss over what goes and what stays.
Can you not just repeal the whole thing? I mean, there's nothing in there that we need.
But sometimes these bills actually do have, and they do this deliberately, they do actually have something in there that everyone will agree is because we do need some laws.
I can't see anything in the protest laws that are particularly necessary. I thought the way things are going.
I'm not a lawyer though, so I don't know what the impact of just repealing it is. Does it leave a hole somewhere else?
Yeah.
But that's why I would say it's if they prioritize that early, then they're not prioritizing the things that people notice because people won't notice that.
Yeah. And also, Flint, thank you very much for the £5 super chat. Really appreciate it. Patrick H is saying, I see Navarra and Owen Jones have been doing their best to minimise Tory losses by criticising Starmer relentlessly. I mean, if they're not getting paid by the Tory party, I think they're missing a trick, to be honest with you. It's like, I don't know. They criticise Starmer more than...
They're getting paid by their own supporters to do it, so they're still making out like bandits. I wouldn't worry about them.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. As long as it's not conveniently lost in the midst. And please discuss the election results. We've been discussing the election results for the last hour, Robin. So yeah, as the polls stand at the moment, the results stand at the moment. The Tories are down 310 councillors. Labour are up 190. Lib Dems are up 77, and the Greens are up 50. So great result for every party that isn't the Tories. So thanks to everyone who voted.
Or UKIP. We might as well just finish off by saying UKIP are no more.
Yes.
No politicians anywhere
out.
in the land.
Wiped out.
They're gone.
Thank God.
Unfortunately, they're Reform UK now, but I don't think they've won anything.
No.
But I don't know how many they've even stood. They may not have stood very many.
All right. Well, listen, we're going to leave it at that. Thank you very much for the super chats and all of your wonderful comments. And thanks to all the patrons out there. If you want to become a patron of this channel and help it grow, head over to patreon.com/Labour Social and you can become a patron. And that'll give you access to our Discord server where we go after our chats here and continue the conversation, which is kind of cool. And Flint says, well done, guys. Great show. Thanks and lovely chatsters too. Well, thank you very much, Flint. And thanks everyone else for watching. It's good night from me and it's good night from Phil. We'll see you again on Monday at 9:30, yeah?
Yeah.
We'll see you then. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.